Want to welcome you back to our series in Ephesians. Guys, not yet. Ho, not yet. Got to have the talk first, right? Okay, want to welcome you back to our series in Ephesians and the believer's armor. Coming up now is the belt of truth. When the kids were young, I tried to motivate them to learn how to play chess by offering each of them a $50 bill for the first time they could beat their dad. The girls have yet to accomplish this feat. Avery is too busy accomplishing everything else she wants to do. Kayleigh-Ann is closing in fast on the goal. Dalton, however, was victorious over me within a year of the challenge. As a young boy, he rightly estimated his skill set in chess to be unmatched with mine, so he waited for the right moment to attempt victory and his $50 trophy. It was a Thanksgiving day, and we were all gathered for the dinner at Jim and Joe Cousins' home. And while the aroma of turkey and buttered rolls floated in the air, and while people were enjoying conversations and cocktails throughout the house, Dalton hatched a scheme after patiently waiting for me to begin my second old-fashioned. It was then, in a moment of compromised alacrity and unfocused attention, that my son, having spotted a chessboard and having observed his father's relaxed and unguarded state, challenged me to a game of chess. A game I played ever so slightly, but ever so effectively under the influence. A game during which I was positively distracted by holiday conversations, and a game I lost, along with a $50 bill, because my commitment to remain focused in concentration lapsed, and I was taken by surprise. Well, to this day, it remains a fun reminder of both my mental lapse and my son's cunning. It is also a fitting reminder of the need for the first piece of the armor of God in which the Apostle Paul would have us fitted. We've been considering the final exhortations from Paul in his letter to the Ephesians and the spiritual battle he describes in chapter 6, beginning with verse 10. And now, having depicted the intensity and the constancy of that warfare, he begins in verse 14 to arm us, as it were, with the military equipment which God has afforded us and which we need to appropriate. The armor of God, which Paul asserts is all we need to defend ourselves against our enemy, begins with what I lacked that Thanksgiving day. It begins with what we cannot afford to ignore on any day, namely an attitude of focus, an attitude of commitment, a spirit of readiness to engage the conflict with our mind, our hearts, and our strength. Listen, we need to understand the necessity of perpetual commitment in standing firm against the schemes of the devil, and to consider and employ strategies to maintain that commitment. Without it, we're already losing. Not that we lose our salvation, but we will lose victory. We'll lose energy. We'll lose our effectiveness, our witness, and our joy. It's the energy to remain on guard that we need. And fortunately, that's where Paul begins his description of the believer's armor. In this talk, we move past the broad strokes of the need for the armor and begin putting it on one piece at a time. So if you have your Bible, turn with me to Ephesians chapter 6, and we will read from the ESV version beginning in verse 10, and this time we'll read through the first piece of armor in verse 14. Finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand, therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. Very simple, very short, very powerful. In seeking to encourage the believer to remain strong in the face of spiritual conflict, Paul turns to a series of figures of speech based on the armor worn by Roman soldiers. This was a natural way for him to illustrate the doctrinal realities that he'd already shared in this letter, since he was under house arrest. Now, having already alerted his readers to the reality of spiritual warfare, he now seeks to arm us in our stance against it by speaking metaphorically of putting on the armor of God. As he begins to enumerate the pieces of military equipment we're to put on, he begins the list by addressing our need to be ready for action as we stand against the schemes of the devil. He connects the idea of a belt to a necessary attitude of alertness, of commitment. And it's this first piece of armor to which we now turn our attention. We'll approach our understanding and use of the belt of truth the same way we'll approach each piece of armor. First, by seeing clearly what the historical piece looked like and how it protected the soldier, and then relating that to our spiritual life, and finally exploring practically how we might appropriate that piece of armor. Let me repeat that so you know exactly how to approach each piece of armor with me. First, we're going to seek to grasp an accurate picture and purpose of the historical piece of armor to which Paul is referring. Then, we're going to try to understand his assumed imaginary resemblance between the piece of armor and the doctrinal reality with which he's connecting it. And then finally, we'll explore a practical definition and some strategies to appropriate the meaning in each of Paul's figures of speech. So let's look at this first one, verse 14, having put on the belt of truth. That's how we stand firm. You might be interested to know that the word belt doesn't even occur in the Greek. It's clearly implied, though, in the phrase, having girded yourself. They didn't have Velcro back then, so a belt is what would come to mind. And it was simply a cord or a strap, a leather, something that wrapped around the waist and held the garments up, held your pants up. And you could also tuck in longer garments into it, which is, I think, the main emphasis here. Some people want to emphasize the fact that it held swords, which it did. Both in the Isaiah passage, the Jews would have one sword that would hang off their belt, and the Roman soldiers had two swords, a dagger and a sword that they would hang off the belt. But I don't think that's the emphasis here, and I'll explain why as we go. I think it's because of the protection that this piece offers. Each figure of speech that Paul employs here has one emphasis, not two. And I think the one emphasis here is the protection that comes from securing your garments to the body and tucking them in. You know, when the Jews went on a long journey, they would gird themselves up for that journey. You find this in various passages in the Old Testament. For example, at the last plague in Exodus 12, it says, gird up for the journey out of Egypt. They were going to have to leave in haste. They had to be ready to leave. And so you girded yourself. You had a long robe on. You would tuck it into the belt. It raised the garment above your knees. And this is typical for somebody who's ready for action. They're ready to move. They're ready to take a journey. Same thing for a soldier. The Jewish soldier would gird up for battle by tucking in the garment and getting the knees and the legs ready to move quickly. And I think that's the emphasis here. I think it's this picture of someone who's ready, someone who has done everything to prepare. And that preparation comes out of a commitment to be on guard, to be alert. The Greek word here for truth, the belt of truth, is the word aletheia. And it can mean truth as content, right? Something's true. Or it can mean truth as in fidelity, truthfulness. We say in a marriage we want someone to be true to us, that is to stick by us, stay with us, remain with us, be committed to us. And I think that's the idea here. The belt of truthfulness is an attitude of readiness. It protects the soldier who's on guard, who's ready, who's focused, and who would not be deceived by trickery or surprise attack because there's a level of commitment that keeps you ready and aware. It's the same word and the same idea in Luke 12:35, where we're told to be ready for Christ's second coming. It represents an attitude of constant preparation. There's no slacking, there's no relaxing. It's a readiness for movement at all times, on guard. And it's an attitude that protects the soldier, who will not be deceived by trickery or surprise attack. So tying that picture of the belt with that meaning and its protection, let's offer a definition. The belt of truth means preparing yourself to stand against the schemes of the devil by maintaining an attitude of commitment or truthfulness. Preparing yourself to stand against the schemes of the devil by maintaining an attitude of commitment or truthfulness. Let's explore some motivations and then some strategies for wearing the belt of truth. Let me give you 4 motivations. This isn't exhaustive, but these are 4 things to chew on. 1, contemplate the times in your past when you failed because of a want of commitment. Just replay that in your mind. I don't mean to be negative here. I'm just saying we can learn something. We can get motivated by the regret of failure. I could have done it if I'd been ready. if I'd been committed, if I'd been focused, if I'd not been caught off guard. Secondly, do that same thing only with the lives of others. This could be people who have had military failure, moral failure, or some failing in a personal goal, whatever. Just replay that and try to get the lesson, try to get motivated about what could have been. Third, contemplate the times of past victories that you've had in your life because you were ready. How did that feel? It was motivating. I want that, not the failure. Fourth, contemplate the occurrences and the consequences of past victories in the lives of others. Again, you can find these in books and newspapers and in reports on TV. Go to YouTube. Look at times when people made it happen, and the reason they were able to make it happen is because they had commitment. You don't want to be without it. So what are some strategies for wearing the belt of truth? I'm going to list 7 real quick. 1, contemplate the ways in which reading good literature can get you ready. I just mentioned it, but newspaper articles, biographies, leadership books, self-help books, testimonies on YouTube and internet. Look for places, look for people, look for times when the fact that somebody was committed is what pushed it over the line. The commitment is what allowed them to run the ball into the end zone. The commitment is what got them there because they were ready in a moment when everyone else was off guard. Second, think about the practices of professions that require this readiness, this attitude of commitment, this focus. People who have to be on guard all the time. Police, security guards, military personnel. How about the folks who are fighting terrorism? Professional athletes, professional musicians. These are people whose commitment has them ready to act at any moment and to do what they do very well. I think about preachers. Paul says to be ready in season and out of season, he tells Timothy. So reflect on those professions and the lifestyles they require and import anything you can into your own commitment to wearing the belt of truth, to putting on this attitude of constant readiness. 3, contemplate the ways in which the Holy Scriptures can help you. You can have an attitude of commitment, but what are you committed to? That's truth. And where do you find that? The Scriptures. Implied in this whole discussion is it's an attitude of commitment to truth, to the Lord. You don't want to be committed to the wrong things. You got to be in Scripture and let that inform you as to your commitment. Let that fuel it. 4th, contemplate ways in which prayer can get you ready. Bringing things to the Lord in prayer is how we keep it in front of our own minds. He doesn't need to hear from us, right? But we ask Him to help us maintain this attitude of commitment. And as we double-click on that, it rehearses the truth in us. Lord, help me be committed to you. Help me be committed to your truth. Help me be committed to my walk with you. Help me be committed in my marriage. Help me to honor the commitments that I have to my children. Help me be committed to my workplace. Help me be committed to the family of faith that you've given me, the church and the leaders. Help me be committed to anything that you have me doing in missions, in reaching those for Christ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Double-click on that. Put names to things. Put faces to things. Put circumstances to things. And rehearse that desire for commitment in your prayer, and you'll find the Lord is keen to answer those prayers. 5th, contemplate the ways in which Christian fellowship can keep you going. Nothing can renew commitment like being with other believers who are committed. Having them breathe fire into you. Don't hang out with people who are constantly negative, who focus on the negative and you magnify what's wrong. Hang out with people who are constantly looking to the Lord for answers, for solutions, for His power, for His wisdom, who are trusting in that. Let them encourage you to have the same attitudes, and you put those on, and it fuels your commitment. 6th, contemplate the ways in which habit can help you. And here I'm just talking about, the habits of everything else I just listed, but habit's a powerful thing. I wake up, I don't think about how to brush my teeth. I'm not sitting there, okay, now I need to squeeze, and now I'm going to hold the brush under, now not sideways, and then now I'm going to put the cap back on, and okay, 1, 2, 3, we're going to start in the left side back here by the time. You don't do that. It's natural because it's what you've done. Make the attitude of commitment a habit by rehearsing the things that I just said. Keep them constantly in your path, in your mind. in your soul. Find ways to do it. Use Post-it notes. Use alarm clocks. Use alarms in your phone. Put pictures up. Put axioms on write them on the mirror in your bathroom, right? Whatever you need, whatever it takes. A myriad of ways that I try to build habits, and use those ways to build the habit of an attitude of commitment. What I mean here is it's easy for especially some personalities, mine included, to get negative and to start focusing on that. And I often recall the words of D. Martin Lloyd Jones. Often we need to stop listening to ourselves and start talking to ourselves. And that's a habit that you can acquire. And in doing that, you remind yourself, I need to be focused. I need to not slack. I need to remember this is warfare. I need to remember there are things of eternal value on the line here. And keep that in front of you and develop that habit. Seventh, finally, is contemplate the ways in which praise and worship can get you ready. I mean, so many people that do what I used to do in the past when I'm trying to, tackle a sin or mortify something or beat something in my life, some negative circumstance. We focus on how do I win? How do I beat this? The best thing you can do is focus on Christ, is turn to Him, is understand, deepen your understanding, celebrate the doctrine of atonement, celebrate and learn and bask in the doctrine of God. Think about His power, contemplate His wisdom, learn about His love, discover His timing that is perfect in everything. Focus on Him, His goodness, and His greatness, and you're going to find your attitude of commitment will blow up. So as we close, here's the thing to remember. If you're not walking around in the spirit of commitment every day, you're an easy target for the forces of darkness. We need to be convinced of this. We need to own it the way Paul owned it. And he did. And that's why he begins his instructions for putting on the armor with the belt of truth. It's that truthfulness that we need. Is that your attitude? Is it mine? If we're to stand firm against the schemes of the devil, if we're to stand against the rulers, authorities, and cosmic powers over this present darkness, if we're going to stand against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places, then it all begins with this belt, the belt of truth. And having fastened it on, we're ready for the next piece of armor, and that's for next time. Well, I hope this has been a blessing. I don't know if you're in a trial today or not, but if you are, we're going to close with a song we used to have at the end of every one of our church services, and it's just a good reminder, even in those bad times, the Lord is the one who's behind it all. He's the one who's created this day. This is